16th, 2021.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. I'm going to shift around the order of our agenda tonight and go to school committee chairperson comments first. Given the size of our gallery tonight and our online community, I do want to remind folks of two of our school committee policies. First being that of recording of events and speakers. We do ask that if you intend to record any portion of the meeting, that the committee is made aware of that, so that because we have an obligation to let members in the room know that they're being recorded. Is there anyone present who intends to record today's meeting?
Is it being recorded?
It is. Yep. And just a reminder to folks that we do record these meetings. They are shown live on our YouTube channel. They are recorded, and you can find the recordings there on the YouTube channel. Okay, secondly, I'd like to remind the public about the school committee policies around the public comment period. Our public comments is intended to be a 15-minute portion of our agenda with citizens who wish to speak signing in. There's a sign-in list over on that table over there. Please list your name and the town in which you live. You can step up to the table to make your public comments. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes apiece. If you have a longer written statement, you may submit that to the committee for a review. Public comments are to be addressed to the committee through the chairperson, and no comments are to be directed specifically towards any committee member. Okay. All that being said, we're going to move to the public comment section of our agenda. Is there anybody who would like to come forward and speak who is present with us today? Thank you. If you wouldn't mind signing in.
I'm ready to sign in. Thanks.
Great, thanks.
Hi, my name is Tabitha Daigle. I am a member of this community. All 4 of my children will be in the Mendon-Upton schools this fall. I want to thank the board for their commitment to this community. Have deep empathy for the board and everyone in this community during this challenging time. I think we have to agree to disagree to start making some progress. Our sciences are completely different. None more truer than the other. It's really just perspective. The media has us divided. You say CDC, we say vaccine company that paid out more last year in compensation than ever in history. You say Board of Pediatrics, we will tell you that Pfizer was their biggest donor last year. You spoke last week of not wearing masks as unconstitutional, that we should not look at it as breathing freely, but rather trying to harm others. If we apply your take on the Constitution, not only are we handing over our rights, we would essentially be trying to track down a germ and its human origin. You can rebuttal these points and see the endless battle of going round and round with each other's interpretation. This game of ping pong will divide us further and further. Maybe instead, we take it as an opportunity to bring our community together, not fall into the same narrative the parents and school boards fighting that we're seeing all too much of. I listened to you share some personal stories last week, how fearful you are of this virus. I have deep empathy for your fears. I have fears as well. One of my top fears is child trafficking, which is taking more kids' lives right now than anything. I can educate and share this information with my community, but I can't tell them what to do with their lives or their children's lives to protect my fears. As a board, you are here unbiasedly representing your community. I ask that you not think of yourself and your fears, but how your community feels. A lot of us fear the slippery slope of mandates and demands, and how is the potential to destroy the public school systems. Maybe the opportunity lies in teaching the kids the importance of taking care of their body. Obesity is ravaging the country, creating weak immune systems that can't handle viruses. Do we teach them to run and hide, or do we prepare them? Do we teach them to sacrifice their own beliefs for someone else? Or can we show them a community that can come together and understand that some people want to wear masks, some don't. Some want to be vaccinated, some don't. And build these kids' futures based on acceptance, forward thinking, instead of division, judgment, and short-sightedness. Instead of debating each other, we can show them to stand true to their convictions, and accept people for who they are. We need to stop telling them they're resilient. They deserve better than that. They deserve an education that isn't pickled in controversy. Staff member at the Clough School suggested on a public forum that we not talk to our children about how we feel about masks. I appreciate the care and concern, but I will remind you that these children are ours. Ours. The opinions and fears of the staff are not ours or our children's to bear. My children are fortunate because they have parents who are able to help them navigate the deficits this last year and a half has caused in their lives. But many kids don't have parents who can or will. They don't have someone telling them not to live in fear. I fear for these kids and their future. Everyone has the ability to protect themselves from whatever they are afraid of in whatever way they see fit. It is a scary and lonely road thinking you need society to conform to survive. Yeah. Again, I thank all of you for your time and efforts, and I hope as a community we can rise up together. Thank you.
Any additional comments?
My name is Mendon. I was here last week. I'm happy to be here again tonight to be able to speak with you regarding our position on making masks optional. I just want to reiterate that we're not asking for a mask ban, but we just want to have a decision for what happens with our children be our own. We realize that the state is now trying to come out with a mandate after months of saying the school districts would be able to decide. And based on some of your comments and reactions last week, I think it's a little easy to conclude that several of you are strongly in favor of having mask mandates in our school. We did go back and forth about some data. It's easy to conclude that there is a lot of misinformation, both sides. But there are a few things that I think we can look at that are hard data. One, I just want to remind about the piece of the parents in Gainesville, Florida, that brought the masks to be tested and found that it had many concerning pathogens on the masks, including tuberculosis, meningitis, pneumonia, among other things. This is highly concerning for parents that do not want their child to be in a mask all day. I did read also that there was a doctor that said you can purchase your own petri dish and perform your own tests if you would like. Some of the data that we can look at are things like how many people have had COVID, how many people have recovered from COVID, what age groups had the highest death rates. Those numbers are 37.8 million had COVID and 37.17 recovered from COVID. So if you look at the numbers, that even if you include the highest level group, which is the 75 plus, the vast majority are still recovering from COVID. In Massachusetts, there have been 0 deaths in the ages of 0 to 14. The ages 15 through 24 had somewhere between 1 and 9. The majority of deaths in Massachusetts have occurred in the same age group, 75 plus. I also want to think about the current case counts. Right now in Massachusetts, there are currently about 20,000 infected individuals out of 7 million people in the state. The death totals on August 17th were 7. August 18th, 11. August 19th, 0. August 20th, 6. Out of 7 million. Did you know that on a daily basis in the United States, 7,700 people die? Did you know that on a daily basis, 165,000 people die in the world? Do you know since the start of COVID that 104,775,000 people have died and only 4.4 million died of COVID out of 104 million?
Yeah. That's your 3 minutes.
I'm sorry?
That's your 3 minutes.
Okay, then I read my ending.
Can she take my 3 minutes?
I don't think there's as many people speaking tonight. Is that all right if I keep reading?
My 3.
Okay.
That's okay.
Do you know that there have been people who have come out to clarify that if somebody was found at the time of death having COVID, it wasn't considered a COVID death? I'm sorry, it was considered a COVID death? The health director of Illinois, Dr. Ezeki, recently gave a press conference and stated, and I quote, "It means technically, even if you die of clear alternative causes, but you had COVID at the same time, it is listed as a COVID death. Everyone who is listed as a COVID death doesn't mean that the cause of death, that was the cause of death, but that they had COVID at the time of death." That's her quote. In 2018 through 2019, there were 45 million cases of the flu and 61,000 deaths. In 2019 through 2020, there were 56 million cases of the flu and 62,000 deaths. In 2020 and 2021, there was 1,675 cases of the flu. It went from 56 million to almost none. And the deaths dropped 97%. Did you know that the CDC came out recently and said that there was no way to distinguish between the flu and the COVID on the current test? So what's my point with all this data? Is COVID real? Sure. Some people have gotten it. However, regardless of what the news media wants to sell you, the numbers are not there for being a deadly pandemic. In fact, right now, the way things look, it's really more of a case study. Largely, people are catching COVID and recovering from COVID. If it was as deadly as they said, we would all be in serious trouble. And I realize that some people think it's because of the precautions that we have taken that has resulted in. But the reason why that reason doesn't hold water is because in other states and regions that has not taken the same precautions, and we had the doctor refer to Sweden, I believe it was, but a state like South Dakota that never had lockdowns, it never had mask mandates, but yet has similar trends in the number of cases and deaths in the surrounding states. This demonstrates that the lockdowns and masks were a non-factor. And as I mentioned last week, that some districts in Florida did not do mask mandates and others did. And there was no statistical difference between the cases and deaths. Texas and Hawaii have had an entirely contrasting approach to dealing with the pandemic, yet their trends in cases and deaths have been remarkably parallel.
Ma'am, that's your 6 minutes.
And I want to say this one thing because I want to end it on positive. I realize that the media has told you repeatedly that we do not care about the safety of your family, and that we do not care about your friends, and that we're blindly ignorant. That this is not the case. I'm your neighbor. I'm your fellow community member. I care about this community as well. But I have to do what I believe is right for my kid based on the data. And when I'm looking at it, does not justify taking risky chances of long-term effects on my child. If we can't live our life the way that we want to, in which we see fit, are we even free? Boston was the birthplace of freedom for the world. Please do not let it be the place where freedom dies.
My name is Tracy McEnany, and I am going to read what my husband prepared. He was here earlier. He was on call, and he had to leave. He got called into work. So bear with me as I read his talk. So my husband is Dr. Patrick McEnany. He's the chairman of surgery at Milford Regional Medical Center. He's employed by UMass Memorial, and his notes and research are a reflection of his understanding of science as he understands it, and not a reflection or a stance for either Milford Regional Medical Center or UMass Memorial. So he says, since I have spent over half of my life in school and or training to become the surgeon I am today, I am accustomed to reading literature and drawing conclusions from the data provided and critiquing it where there are holes in the scientific process. As a surgeon, my profession is one in which mask wearing is nothing new. Prior to the early months of 2020, our surgical masks were worn in the operating room, primarily with the fairly infrequent occasion in which we needed to see a patient with tuberculosis, which is a highly contagious pulmonary disease. In this latter group of patients, we would need to wear an N95 mask. Many of you, I would guess, have never heard of these masks before the COVID outbreak. More on the N95s later. Given the newness of the virus, when our country was first facing the outbreak, our government was providing us with very mixed messages that were unfortunately based primarily on a best guesses, but oftentimes a political lean. Furthermore, those same politicians continued to tell us to follow the science. I guarantee you that the vast majority of them had majored in political science, which sounds more like the science that they are following and not actual science based on scientific data. I'd like to spend a few moments discussing with you actual science. Let's first start out by discussing the masks themselves. The size of most viruses range between 20 nanometers to 500 nanometers, which translates into 0.2 microns for the smaller range on that actual scale. Bottom line, the mask needs to ideally keep the smallest size particle from getting through to protect the wearer. An N95 mask worn properly can filter particles typically as small as 0.1 microns. In other words, the N95 is useful in stopping those particles for those that were actively infected and protecting the healthcare provider in close contact with someone who is sick and actively infected. If any of you have had the luxury, or should I say displeasure, of wearing a properly fit N95, they are incredibly uncomfortable and it is not easy to breathe through them. I am not making the case to wear N95s, as this would only exacerbate other problems that you will hear later.
Ma'am, we're at 3 minutes.
Steve Daigle, I'm signed in. I donate my 3 minutes session.
Thank you.
Hold on, before you go for those 3 minutes, I'd like to check to see if there's anybody on our Zoom who'd like to add any comments.
Can I finish?
How about after she's done?
Sam is available.
Yeah, go ahead, she should get to finish. We're in the middle.
She's in person, let her finish.
I'm just checking in. Sam, is there anybody waiting?
As of right now, there is nobody.
Thank you. We're also at our 15-minute public comment limit, so I'll allow 3 more minutes.
Most individuals who wear masks at indoor public places where they may or may not be mandated to do so are wearing either a cloth mask or even a variety of the same surgical masks that we wear in the operating room. The ferocity of these masks is comparable to me playing goalkeeper in an English Premier Soccer League soccer match. Everything is getting by. In other words, the masks are doing nothing except for the individual who sneezes or coughs without doing what we have all learned to do, which is cover our mouths with our arms. Even with the mask, there are plenty of droplets getting out of the sides of the mask. But if you're just breathing normally, there is no virus spreading all over the place. If you're just talking normally, and don't splatter when you speak like Daffy Duck. Now let's look at some data in action that lends credence to not implementing the mask mandate. In Sweden, in which schools were not closed and students were not masked during the pandemic, there were 0 deaths from COVID-19 in 1.95 million Swedish children during that study period. Furthermore, when mask mandates were followed in various countries and US states, there was an increase in case counts. There were 0 benefits to adding a mask mandate in Austria, Germany, France, Spain, UK, Belgium, Ireland, Portugal, Italy, and US states like California and Hawaii. These data highlight the lack of protection that the mask is supposed to provide against COVID-19 infection. How about the effect the masks themselves have on those wearing the masks? In addition to hypoxia, low oxygen levels, and hypercapnia, high CO2 levels, the bacterial components that layer the face mask create the environment whereby those toxins are repeatedly rebreathed back into the body. They have also found the increased temperature and humidity that is created with the mask in place results in the release of toxic particles from the mask's materials. The rebreathing of contaminated air with high bacterial and toxic particle concentrations, coupled with low oxygen and higher CO2 levels, challenge body homeostasis, causing self-toxicity and immunosuppression. Furthermore, this low oxygen, high CO2 environment can result in a stress response similar to a fight or flight that is constantly at a low level of stimulation. This chronic and prolonged state of stress, fear, is maladaptive and has detrimental effects on physical and mental health. Getting back to the reflection on what has transpired thus far and where things have evolved, there were many people who died resultant from the COVID outbreak. The absolute vast majority of those individuals were over the age of 65, many of whom were in their 70s or older and also had comorbidities such as morbid obesity and COPD. Does that description fit the students in our school system? I don't think so. Yes, there is a Delta variant, which is a genetic alteration of the original virus, which happens quite regularly with many viruses. I can tell you, despite the screams from news media outlets that this is just going to be like the last time or perhaps worse, we are not seeing the hospitalizations or degree of illness or deaths that plagued our country when this first took hold early in 2020.
And that's your additional 3 minutes.
It's almost done.
The statement was read in its entirety during our policy subcommittee meeting.
You want it on camera for everyone
And it
else
was
to see.
recorded.
It wasn't recorded, but yeah, I think the people on Zoom would love to hear about from a doctor's point of view. Because you guys aren't doctors, right?
Undoubtedly, vaccinations coupled with natural immunity for those that have become infected are playing a huge role in that less aggressive clinical impact. Once again, however, those that are impacted by this are the elderly with comorbidities, characteristics that absolutely do not describe any student in our school system. 2 other points that I would like to make. First, this will not be the last we see of this virus, and it will likely be something that we will need to live with for the rest of our lives, as new variants evolve, each with some unique features relative to another. Presently, we have the beta variant, the alpha variant, and the gamma variant. Just like the flu virus that we see each year, it also has higher mortality rates in the elderly with comorbidities. It mutates year to year, and I very much expect this to do the same. Do you want to wear masks for the rest of your life because a government with an agenda tells you to do so without data to back up that mandate? Second, suicide is the leading cause of death in school-aged children, which has been worsened considerably since the onset of the pandemic. Adding further insult to injury, its dearth of resources available to help treat mental health issues and suicide prevention. At my hospital, Milford Regional, I have lost 2 members in my department to suicide, resultant from the downfall of what has transpired since the virus leaked from a research lab in China. On any given day at Milford Regional Medical Center, approximately 20% of the patients in the ER are in need of mental health services. At 3:30 today, that was at least 17 of 81 patients. This has been a terrifying and troubling uptrend made worse since the pandemic. My fear is that the mandates imposed on our children, who are at an absolutely incredibly low risk to get sick from COVID, will make this trend worse.
There
In
are
short-
people on Zoom that are also raising their hands. So we
Okay,
need to allow them.
You have one more sentence left.
I literally got
Okay.
3 sentences
I
left.
fully understand that, however, there are other people.
And we're here in person, we're here in person.
All right, just let me finish my 1 sentence.
We'll
here.
wait to records.
In short, any one of your children is statistically at higher risk of dying from suicide than COVID. Don't make this suicide stat worse.
I'd like to ask that we extend the public comment period because we have a lot of people that took time out of their schedules to come here and speak their minds. And I think you want community engagement in this big decision. So I would ask that we extend the time.
We do, and there's been a policy meeting before this. We've now allowed almost 25 minutes for this during this meeting. I think many of you have chosen to share your viewpoints with us through email, which all of us have been very diligent about meeting. I'd like to give a few more minutes to the folks who are on Zoom, who've waited, and then we're going to move on with our agenda for tonight.
We had two people, or at least one person in this room that wanted to wait for this meeting to speak as well, that was here before in the subcommittee meeting. So perhaps we can make time for that person who came.
At this point, we're going to start wrapping up community comments and moving on with our agenda. We devoted almost an hour to this conversation at our last meeting. We devoted almost a half an hour at this meeting. We're going to hear a few more on Zoom, and then we're going to move on. Please feel free to reach out to us through email. I'm sure this is a subject that will come up again in another school committee meeting. We encourage your participation, but we do have other items that we need to get to in order to prep for the beginning of the school year.
Gina Gerasi, you are live and are allowed to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, okay. I don't know if you can see me, but hello. So I don't have a prepared write-up or anything, but I just wanted to make some comments about the whole mask situation. I mean, I thought it was mandated, so I'm surprised that we're having a conversation about it. I did want to comment that regarding the viral particle size of the microns, which can vary from 2 micron up to 6 micron for these viral particles. They're also going to vary based on the plumes, so we can have, larger droplets, smaller droplets, and it is, the level of viral load is correlated with severity of illness. So, and it can be a hit or miss with the mask. I agree with that. But then the second part too is, I don't know about you guys, but my kids didn't get sick at all when we were masking it. It's just the truth. We didn't get the colds, the flu, whatever. Obviously the masks do work in that sense. But my question is tonight for the school committee, assuming that these mandates are happening anyway, is about school shutdowns. So if we're going to think about suicides or how it's affecting our kids, if we end up having transmission and then we do have to quarantine the classes, I'm curious about that. How is the school going to manage that? Do we have any kind of plan of what happens if kids do start testing positive? That's what I'm kind of concerned about, that, about the schools, my kids ending up back in the house. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina.
Thank you. And as of right now, there are no hands raised.
And Dr. Kuhn, the question about plans for if we have to quarantine, can you talk about that a little bit?
I can, sure. The state just came out with some recent COVID protocols related to various scenarios. So what we're going to do, starting this week as part of our district protocols, we're going to start sharing out what those guidelines are. In the last meeting that I participated in last week, they shared that they were going to have follow-up FAQs that they were going to release, and then we'll follow up with those FAQs as well. When I was in meetings with them a couple weeks ago, they didn't have some of the answers, but they're starting to have answers for us. So it's pretty complicated based off of whether or not you're vaccinated and different statuses. So what we'll do is we'll put the charts out, and the state's also coming out with kind of flow charts to show what we would be doing if that were the case. So I would say stay tuned, but it's going to come out. We'll release it later on this week to the community.
That's all coming from the state level,
Yes.
they're not being.
It's
doing
from,
like last
it's from
year when we had
DESI,
to,
yeah,
okay.
guidance, and anytime they release something new, then we go back and ask them specific questions that are coming up in the field, and then they come back to us with FAQs and follow-up information that we can share with our communities.
And with that, we're gonna wrap up the community comments portion of our
I
agenda.
have something to add. Jay Kraus, 17 Washington
I'm
Street.
sorry, sir, but we're wrapping up our community comments. If you would
You're not
like
gonna
to
give me
share
a
with
chance
us.
to speak?
We had over
You're
a
not
half
gonna
an
get-
hour.
I'll take 1 minute at a
It's
time.
not enough time.
1
It's
minute.
an important issue. I think we really need to.
So I've been here for 30 minutes. In the time that I've sat here,
I'm sorry,
everyone in the
Chairman,
committee that's in
order,
plain
this is out of
sight,
I'm
I've seen
sorry,
you all
Chairman,
adjust
this is
your
out of
mask,
order.
fiddle with your mask, rest your
I'm
face
sorry,
on your
Chairman,
hand,
this is
I'm
out of
sorry,
order.
sir, we
rendering
decided
them
to move
useless.
Why is it out of order?
It's out of order because we've ended community
Because
comment.
you're afraid he's gonna hit your child with a truck. You're an
I'm
animal
sorry,
last week.
excuse me, but no.
What do we expect of our children in K through 12 if you can't sit here for half an hour without touching your mask?
I'm
You rendered
sorry,
them useless.
I'm sorry, Chairman, this is out of order.
No, I'm not.
I'm-
I just want a minute to
Actually,
speak.
you are, because we've ended that.
These
portion of
children
our-
aren't
of our
affected by this in the
agenda,
same
and we're
way. They
moving
don't
on
transmit
to
it. They don't contract it the
Right.
same way. There's only been 4.2 million cases in the country, 330 million people. That's 1.27%, and of that, 0.008% fatality rate. It's near non-existent. These masks don't work. We don't need to protect our children with measures that don't work. We need to protect them from bureaucrats, politicians, and corrupted, powerful teachers' unions. They don't work.
They don't work. We don't consent.
Yeah, we'll be
I
here at every
apologize.
meeting.
We do not have
We'll be here and we're
consent.
gonna hear us
It's
speak.
to mask
Excuse me,
our
but we're
children.
going to move on with our agenda.
You
We're
do
gonna
not
call
have
on
my
the police
consent
department
to
take
put a
control of the
mask
room.
that's
We're not gonna
harmful
do that.
on my daughter.
We're
What
not
are you gonna do with the
this
kids
right
that
now.
won't put them on?
Yeah, what are the
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
They're
What
not
are the
wearing
repercussions that you're gonna mask up?
You're gonna kick them out of public schools?
Yeah, I'm putting mine in private, you guys paying for it?
We're gonna move on with our meeting.
They're not wearing masks.
I'm taking his advice and I'm
So
putting my
what-
child in private.
One thing I'd love to say to the community, I really do appreciate that we have so many people who have communicated to us and shared their thoughts on whether or not they're in favor of masks or not. And I really just, I do want to thank you for that, because it's been probably the most engagement I've seen with the community recently. And I also, it's the most people that I've seen in some of these meetings. So I just want to thank you, and I appreciate that. It is important, I just want to say with these meetings too, that we're able to proceed with the work that the committee has. And I would recommend that if you have further information that you want to share, if you had a statement that you weren't able to read, that's something that you can continue to submit to us, and we're happy to submit it into record that we had those statements. So I just want to jump in there, but the yelling is not going to be helpful in this meeting or other meetings, so
Be willing to try.
I'd ask for,
Be willing to try.
I'd
Just
ask
ask them to be
respectfully for
optional.
everyone to refrain from that. So in my interim superintendent comments, I do have a few items that I'd love to share with the committee tonight. So first, we have a school calendar. This is something that the school committee does approve every year, and sometimes we have some updates to that with upcoming new contract with the Teachers Association that we're waiting for ratification. We have two proposed additional half-day PD days that we'd like to propose to add to the school calendar. The primary benefit of this additional PD time would allow for us to provide ongoing PD for our staff throughout the year, rather than in some of the isolated pockets that we have on the few full days that we have in our calendar currently. It would also give our teachers and staff some time where they're at their school-based, and they're often requesting in our PD surveys for additional time to work together and collaborate. So this would allow for that by adding in the 2 half days. That's something that would need to be vote here tonight. And so I wanted to bring it forward as soon as possible, so that way we could communicate to the parents in the community so they're aware of that change in the calendar. So the 2 dates that are recommended, the first one would be on December 10th, which would end up being a half day for students, early release, and then it would be a PD for our staff in the afternoon, and the second proposed date is February 18th. That is right prior to the school vacation, but the teachers recommended that that might be a great date to all of the families that might be leaving early, and they'd be able, it would help them out with some of those early travel dates that sometimes happen. So we were gonna try that out this year. And these two dates alternate with other months that we have as well for PD, so we're able to extend some strands of learning around our themes and strategic plan throughout the year. So this would take a school committee motion and vote for approval.
Make a motion to add December 10th, 2021 and February 18th, 2022 as early release half-day professional development days to be out there.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I also wanted to give a highlight on some of the changes in back to school communications that are taking place. We're trying, one goal of mine is to increase our back to school communications and just communications in general. And one thing that I plan to start doing is sending out some newsletters to the community, which will be coming out later on this week. But we also have school newsletters, principal updates that are coming out at the end of the week and ongoing related to back to school planning. Last week we added, just so people who are watching are here, we added to our website lots of updates related to bus routes, school hours, the school calendar. We do have some school hour changes in our schedule, so we're going to keep communicating that out so families are aware of that. And also, we have lots of mini school-sponsored and PTO-sponsored events taking place the coming week. And so a few that I just wanted to note here publicly, we have Nipmuc Freshman New Student Orientation tomorrow. There's popsicles in the park on Friday for incoming pre-K1, and at 6 p.m. for incoming second grade to fourth grade students at the playground at Memorial Park on Taft Ave in Mendon. Memorial Kindergarten Playdate is at the elementary school on August 28th at 10. The club kindergarten meet and greet will be Tuesday, August 24th at 5:30. The Misco Hill Grade 5 Parent Info Night and Student Popsicle Social will be August 26th at 6:30. I plan to be at as many of the events as I'm able to fit into my calendar this week, and looking forward to meeting a lot of the new students and families too who are transitioning or coming into our district. In addition to that, I just recently created a new district Facebook page. We just tentatively, I guess you call it a soft launch over this weekend. We haven't really shared it out because I wanted to share it publicly here. But our goal with that is to start to push out these notifications through multiple platforms, where you'll have it on our district Twitter page, but also Facebook page, website, and hopefully the I didn't know this was happening type of thing, and that as a parent where I live, I often don't know what's happening. So I think the more we can communicate to families constantly across multiple directions, and that will be really helpful for us. This week, we'll be sending out some updates, as I mentioned, related to health protocols, back to school information, and then from a district level, but from the school-based buildings, they'll also be following up with some school-based FAQs that are coming up if people have some questions related to some of the new guidance coming out. Anyone have any questions related to the communication portion? All right, thank you. And so moving on to the next item, I asked Trish Parent if she could come on up, if you don't mind coming up, Trish, and from the Board of Health. And we've been in close contacts. A lot of the work that we're doing too is to make sure we're looking at, we get a lot of information on global, national, state level, but also looking at where we're at with data here in both of our communities. So I asked her to come and just give us a couple highlights, and if you had any questions for her, she's willing to answer whatever she's able to.
Hi. Thank you, school committee, for having me. Thank you, Dr. Cohen, for asking me to come. I know you also reached out to Mendon, and I want to make sure everyone knows that unfortunately, nobody from the town was able to come tonight, but I was in contact with Ann Levante, who is their public health nurse, and with Missy, who is at the Board of Health office over in Mendon. I'm sure some of you know. And we talked about where the rates of positivity rates and so forth are in both of the towns. So I think we're kind of on the same page with what I'm going to say. I do want to make sure, first of all, my name is Trish Parent, and I am the Upton Public Health Nurse. I've been the Upton Public Health Nurse for 27 years. I just realized today that I missed my 40th anniversary as a nurse, which was this year, so congratulations to me. Okay. And I've learned a lot in my 27 years of public health. I would say that the last year and a half to two have been the most challenging of those 27 years, as they have been for most of us. So in addition to that, I'd like to say that last year, all during the school year, I was overwhelmed with the amount of participation that the school district had give and take the town to the school district to the town. I think I talked to Leslie McGinnis more than I did most of my family. So we have a good thing going here in this school district, and I think everybody's opinions matter, and I think everybody's perspective matters, and I think everybody is trying to do the best they can for themselves and their families. I have to take, anybody who's in public health has to take the individual, unfortunately, out of the picture, okay? And lots of times. Public health is made up of a lot of individuals. All of us are making up public health. I have a thing on my car that says public health is your health. It's your health. It's everybody's health. But what it is, and what the perspective I have to take, is it's the community's health as a whole, okay? And that's where sometimes personal feelings about different strategies differ, okay? I'm not going to try to convince those who don't believe in masks or believe in their efficacy. I'm not going to do that because I don't think I need to do that. What I'm asking you to try to take into consideration is that we have some tools. They are tools that have been in existence for a long time, most of them. Vaccinations have been in existence for a long time. Mask wearing or barrier wearing has been in existence for a long time. Washing your hands has been in existence for a long time. All of these are individual strategies that make up how we can try to attack something that's new in the infectious disease world. But it's not new strategies, okay? They're all tools that you can use, and not one of them, not one individual tool is going to make it go away. I don't care if we get 100% vaccination rate. We are not going to make COVID go away just by doing that. We have to do the other strategies. Now, we wanted more than anything to get people back into the classrooms, back to work. Just out of your house would be nice. And we've done that by utilizing as many of these tools as possible and getting enough individuals to use them where the public health has become a little bit better. Having said that, I take a very common sense approach to everything I do. You could take numbers and you can make them dance, and people know how to do that. And it's great that they know how to do that. And we need science, and we need those articles, and we need them peer reviewed, and we need all that stuff. But we also need to look at what's happening in our community. And what I'm seeing right now is there has been an uptick. There has most definitely been an uptick in the last month to month and a half, in particular in the last 3 weeks. We have started to see, maybe it's Delta variant, maybe it isn't. I don't know, I don't have that. We don't get that, okay? We get, every day I wake up and go like this with my phone and say, how many cases am I gonna have today? This is what I do every day. Oh geez, okay. And for a while there, it was down to sometimes 0. And I really wanted to do a dance when I got up at 5:30 and saw a 0. I was so excited because they like to dump them at 2 o'clock in the morning into my workflow. So anyway, we started to see the uptick from July 30th to August 23rd. We have had 24 new cases of COVID come through my workflow. What the workflow is we then have to contact trace all that out, okay? So we have to do the interview with the case, find out how many people with the new algorithms of whether you're vaccinated, not vaccinated, so forth and so on, we have to find out how many close contacts we have to quarantine or ask to quarantine, because that isn't mandatory. Isolation is mandatory. If you are a case of COVID, we could, quote unquote, do other things to try to make you stay home. But quarantine has always been just highly, 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 highly recommended. 16 of those 24 cases were confirmed cases. What a confirmed case is a molecular test. It's the PCR you've heard of. There's an RD gene that's also a molecular test. Those are considered confirmed cases. These are CDC definitions, they're not mine. 8 probable cases. Out of those 24, there have been 8 probable cases. Those are the cases that got the rapid test, that got the antigen test, okay? Those were at the beginning of COVID considered to be less reliable, and still to this day, if you get a positive antigen test and you don't think you have COVID, if you get a PCR test within 48 hours of that antigen test that was positive and it comes up negative, you don't have to follow anything to be a case of COVID. You are no longer considered a case of COVID. Just saying. In those, since July 30th, we have had 6 of those 24 cases were less than 19 years old. 6 of those 24 cases were in their 20s. 2 of those cases were in their 30s. 6 were in their 40s. 2 were in their 50s. And 2 were over 65. That's what the breakdown for Upton has been. I do not know the breakdown for Mendon. I'm sorry about that.
How many died?
What were the outcomes?
I don't have all the outcomes. You don't have the outcomes until sometimes much later.
So we could do actually.
Excuse me,
Hold on,
Could
I'm
finish,
sorry, I
please?
shouldn't have been, I'm sorry. But since I heard the question, I'll answer. We do the initial interview. We call the person 10 days later to see if they have recovered. All I can tell you is the ones that answer. All I can tell you is I have had, at the end of 10 days, I have had somebody in the hospital, but I don't know what that outcome's gonna end up being. I don't have that information. I would have to go back much later and find that information. I can tell you that the state does put on their website, mass.gov/COVID, every week on Thursday. They post how many tests have been done for individual towns and how many have turned out positive. The last one that we had was 11 positive test results in the 2-week period that they measured. Okay, it's a funny measurement, but it goes up to the Saturday before the posting. And we had 11 cases out of 440 tests for a 2.5% positivity rate. Mendon had 8 positive cases out of 339 tests for a 2.3% positivity rate. I can tell you that positivity rate is creeping upward. We would like to not see it be doing that, but it is doing that. We were in the beginning of July, late June, I would say we were at 1%. Okay, now the other skew in this is not as many people seem to be getting tested. I don't know if that's because they're not experiencing severe enough symptoms, they're writing it off as something else. There's no travel testing regulations anymore. So some of that is because of that. So we're not seeing as many tests. I would like to see more tests because I'd like to see what disease is out there. Again, I am a common sense type person, but there have been enough documented studies done now that at least with the Delta variant, vaccinated people who have what we call breakthrough disease can in fact, without symptoms at all, can in fact transmit COVID to another person, vaccinated or unvaccinated. Now, the result of that illness, we won't know for 2 weeks sometimes. So we have a varying thing going on. What I was also seeing, I can tell you, is that probably 3 weeks ago now, although the CDC had determined that Worcester County was for a substantial community transmission risk, the whole county, when you drilled down to Mendon-Upton numbers, we did not see the large amounts of cases that would make up that. That's usually an 8 to 10% positivity rate, okay? It's hard to do for tiny towns, though. That's why they made that map that had all the colors, and they made the tiny towns just have to have a set number. If you went over that number, you went up a risk category. So it's hard to do the 8 to 10% thing, but clearly we're at 2.5%. Again, might be the amount of testing that's being done, might be that that's really reflective. I really can't tell you that. What I can tell you that, again, 3 weeks ago or so, I would have wagered a bet that 90% of the cases I was seeing came from travel. Because when the interview was done to the people that picked up the phone, you would get down to the questions they asked about what did you do in the last 14 days, and many of them had been on family vacations. Some of them had been tested in other states on family vacation because they came down with symptoms. So I would have said that was where most of the disease was at the time. So I didn't consider that very high community transmission because you're somewhere else, you're bringing it home, you're staying in your house, you're sick altogether, you're done, okay? I wasn't thinking too much of it. In the last 2 weeks, I'm seeing a trend out of that. Now, not as many people are answering the question, which makes it difficult for public health to do any good contact tracing, but their individual addresses. I was seeing, very few addresses with 10 cases, meaning the whole family had it. Now I'm seeing individual addresses here, there, and everywhere in the town. So not in the same area, didn't have a block party that I can tell, weren't all at the same birthday party, whatever. So that's raising a little bit of concern for me. Upton also, if I can go back to the beginning of COVID, in March of 2020, it took Upton and Mendon for that matter, some time to get out of the low risk. We kept saying, what's everybody talking about? We're doing really well, our numbers are really down. And then you saw and everything went up and we were in the red for many, 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 many weeks. Trust me, I was up really late doing this, so I know that we were in the red a lot. Now, as far as vaccination rates, our other really good tool to use in our toolbox, besides these other common public health things, are in your group that you are most interested in, the 12 to 19-year-olds is really, 12 to 15-year-olds, we're talking fully vaccinated people, are at about 55%. That was of 8, 12, 21. Okay, 55%, the numbers that the state has put out. We have 75% for the 16 to 19-year-olds, which is a really, really great number. Both those numbers are they're pretty good. They're getting there. And I think as of today, with the FDA approval of Pfizer, I'm hoping that will boost some rates for people that might have been hesitant without the extra testing that was done. So I'm hoping that's going to increase. Again, a tool. They're not 100%. They're not
9% actually.
They're not 100%. However, what they do very, very, very well is that they keep you out of the hospital and out of the grave. And those are the two things that we want to happen. We are well aware that a lot of people will recover from this, but we all have the same horror stories, or many of us have the same horror stories, and I in particular have quite a few horror stories because I'm the one investigating these cases. And they are perfectly healthy people, perfectly young, perfectly in shape, and they're not with us anymore. And it does happen. It is rare. Of course it's rare. But if we can do anything to do better as a community helping each other, these masks are not for us. For the most part, they're not for us, they're for you, and you, and you, and you, and you. They're so that when I talk, and I'm sorry, but I do spit when I talk, that you're not, hopefully, you've got a barrier, but that barrier is not gonna save you from every particle, of course it's not. But there is a barrier from me spitting on you. That's a good thing. Okay, that's a good thing.
Can you cite any studies that show
Excuse
that?
me. Her purpose of this meeting is to share information with the school committee for our ability to ask for questions to guide our policy decisions.
I haven't
not
heard you
to
ask
But
for
there's
any
a
questions.
foundational misunderstanding.
I
Where does
just
she
want-
come
You can
from?
write down any of
Where's
the
her
facts,
knowledge
the
from?
woman, the doctor.
I just want to make sure that I talk about, what I said to begin with was that I look at public health as a group, it's a community effort. It's a community effort. It has to be a community effort. And you guys are doing wonderfully well at a very challenging time, trying to keep your students in the schools. And I think Upton right now, Mendon right now, we're doing very well. It is upticking. You take that for what it is upticking. And I expect that it's going to keep going there. And if I was right, seeing after investigation, seeing how many people answered yes to travel in the 14 days prior to their interviews when they were a case of COVID, I think that we can probably assume that there will be travel going on in the next couple of weeks before school starts.
Do you guys
I
happen
would
to get
expect
sick
that.
from the vaccine?
Are there questions from the committee for Ms. Kemp?
You
have the
you
U12
mentioned that more
now.
individual cases, more individualized cases are happening around. What are the implications of that?
I don't know yet. We don't have enough, to tell us. These are small numbers, so I don't really have enough. All I can tell you is, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, since we had 6 people in their 20s, 6 people under the age of 19, and 6 people in their 40s. Some of this might have been families at the beginning, but now what I'm seeing is a 30-year-old here and a 50-year-old there and a 20-year-old there, and I'm not seeing, either they're not having the rest of their family tested, which is a possibility, or they're assuming that they have COVID because the one person has COVID and they haven't been able to be away from that person, especially when you're talking about kids. It's very rare for a kid to have COVID and not have the parents have COVID. But that's happened. I've had kids be positive cases and there's no sign of a parent at that same address or even connected to it. So I don't know what the implications of that are right yet. But like I say, all I can tell you is the community, the status right now is that we're doing well in comparison to some other places, even in our own county apparently. But we are still upticking. And that travel seems to be correlated in some of these cases.
What was your question?
Yeah, so you mentioned that you said 6 of the cases were under 19 or under, 6 were in the 20s and 6 were in the
40s.
Okay. You don't have data for what's U12, do you? Under 12.
I should have brought my other thing, but
It's okay, I mean, if you don't, it's.
if I just did these, so I would say 3 of the 6 were under 12.
Okay.
And I would say for a ballpark, if you'd like a ballpark, I've been going individually into the MIIS system, which is where all vaccinations are recorded. And I have tried to pull out data for any case I get as to, even if they don't answer the phone to a contact tracer, I'm trying to find whether they're vaccinated through another direction. And I would say approximately 30 to 40% of the cases that are eligible to have vaccines, so obviously under 12 would be taken out of that group, about 30 to 40% do have vaccines. So those would be your breakthrough cases.
So I just have one more
Sure.
question. So once again, how long have you been a public health official? And a
27
nurse?
years.
And a nurse?
40.
Okay. Thank you.
The sample size of
We asked
24 is way
So
too small
so
for
one
any
more question.
guideline.
I think there's I think there's a concern as we move forward to make sure we're tracking, especially those who've not been vaccinated. Is that something, because we had a pretty robust tracking methodology going a year ago. But is that something that we're going to be focused on going forward? Make sure we understand that.
I think they'll do it at a population level, but I think doing it, you don't have the right to, go after people who aren't vaccinated. You just can't do that. So HIPAA prevents us from, getting into it too much. I can, like I say, the only database that I can do is I can go on to the MIS, which is the Massachusetts Immunization Information System, that all doctors and all of us in public health have access to. And we can see if you've had a vaccine. I can see if you've had a flu shot. I can see if you've had, whatever. But I only do that for informational purposes for the group. That's really the only thing I do it for.
So let's say we're in a situation where we have to react to a public health emergency. Sometimes we don't get all the guidance that we would like to get from the state, from the health organizations at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that we can understand that information more quickly, or is that just stuff we just gotta wait for?
I don't see a way other than manually going in and doing it as I'm doing. I would have that information if you're talking about an Upton situation, because those are the people I'm looking at. And these come out once a week, I believe. The updated immunization chart. It's very convoluted to read, but other than that, when you dig down, you actually find the information.
So weekly,
you can look at the percentage going up.
Okay.
Yes, yes, and it has gone up a little bit. It has gone up in the school age, 1% in the school age children. And I think, like I say, after the FDA approval, that might come up a little bit more. So.
The breakdowns of the ages, the 12 to 15 and 16 to 19, is that just what the state provides, or can you look at, so we, like, for example, obviously our high school, students range in age from 14 to 18, so is it possible to get that data?
I probably could with a lot of, a lot more hours,
Manual labor.
I can do it easily. I can do it easily for cases, okay? But I don't, I'd have to look at every single student. I'd have to go in for every single student to see whether they were vaccinated.
Define an emergency. Is an emergency one kid that got?
Excuse me,
sorry,
sir.
that's way out of order.
You're disrupting a meeting that we're trying to hold.
I'm asking questions you guys refuse to ask.
You're
It's
talking about
about
taking away our freedoms,
It's
and you're
about
dismissing it as
results,
if it's
outcomes.
based
No
on
one cares about
assumptions.
cases of young children. They're gonna get it. We're all gonna get it.
Sir, we're going to move on with our meeting. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the committee for Ms. Karen?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Keep in mind that, we're your friends, everybody's friends, and anybody in this room or elsewhere can call down to the Board of Health at any time, and I will do my best to dig down and try to find some numbers or whatever else needs to be done. So feel free to call anytime.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
help. Appreciate it.
Done for your section?
Sure. So we have administrator comments. So I'd love to invite Jen D'Angelo up, our Director of Student Support Services, who's going to speak about pre-K tuition rates.
Hi, how are you tonight? Thanks for having me. So I'm here tonight to talk about pre-K tuition rates. We set those every year at the beginning of the pre-K year. What I thought I'd do is give you a little overview of our programming, just so you have an idea of what we're doing and what we did last year and kind of where we're headed this year. So currently we have 2 pre-K programs. They run at each of our elementary schools. So Memorial and Clough each have a pre-K program. It's a single classroom supported by a teacher and 2 paraprofessionals. It's an integrated model, so it hosts students with and without disabilities. Last year, our enrollment status at Memorial, we have an AM program, which is our 3-year-olds, and our afternoon program, which is our 4-year-olds. Last year, Memorial housed 34 students between the 2 programs, 16 at the 3-year-old level and 18 at the 4-year-old. And Clough hosted 25, 10 learners at the AM group and 15 in the PM We also were able to do 28 initial evaluations. So our evaluations come in from staff referrals, parent referrals, and also through our partnership with Early Intervention, which are services that are provided to our young learners from ages up until age 2 and 9 months, and then they transition into our public program. So this year, our current enrollment, we're looking at Memorial, the AM, which is a 3-year-old group, our 13 early learners, and 16 early learners in our 4-year-old program. And at Clough, we have 11 early learners in our AM group and 14 early learners in our PM group. We do leave a little bit of room in our 3-year-old program, so you'll notice there's a little bit of a discrepancy with the numbers of students that we enroll in the 3 and the 4, and that is to allow for that early intervention referral process to happen. So as students become 3 or approach the age of 3, we do that transition from their state agency over to the public education. So we do leave a little leeway with our enrollment to ensure that we have space for those students if they do need support from us as they turn 3 throughout. So with that being said, right now the 2 things that we focus on with our programming is to ensure that we're able to meet the needs of all of our learners and also keep a balanced ratio of students with disabilities and without disabilities. So capacity is something that we look at. Our ideal classroom size for our 3-year-olds is at the 12 mark, and for our older students at the 4 is 16. So those are kind of the parameters we work within. Obviously this is, especially in the 3-year-old level, there's a lot of flexibility every year. We do have right now pending 3 incoming students who are going to be part of our referral process in the upcoming months. So we do account for those. And then again, we leave another 4 to 5 seats available. Memorial right now is at capacity. So we are looking to see what we're going to do for those students, whether they're going to attend our club program or if there's some ability to kind of expand our offerings at Memorial. So that's where we are. If I could take any questions before I talk about rates.
What are the main activities for the pre-K program?
Yeah, great question. So our pre-K students come in, and their curriculum is a 2-year curriculum, so it goes through the 3 and the 4. The pre-K also aligns with the K curriculum, so a lot of families are very concerned about if they didn't have 2 solid years of pre-K, what does that look like when they go into the K? It is a continuum of curriculum that the state puts out for pre-K and K. So there's standards that they look at, most of them around sharing, common play, building their skills around social, emotional, and development, and then some academic fundamentals around numeracy, word recognition, and early literacy around more about awareness than it is reading when you get into that K level. Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
I'll save the financial question.
All right. So last year, I forgot to say one more thing too. Last year, we were able to engage in a curriculum review with the teachers. So the curriculum in the pre-K hadn't been updated in quite some time. So we were able to use some grant funding. We wrote a grant for some funding, and we were able to purchase we reviewed 3 curriculums. We narrowed it down to 2. And then the curriculum that we ended up choosing aligns with our K through 4 curriculum. So there were a lot of added benefits to that curriculum, but on top of the fact, it really set the standard for our kids transitioning into K. So they were familiar with the materials, they were familiar with the structure of the learning activities, the cooperative activities. So we really felt it was a nice transition for them to have that same curriculum in 3 and 4 before they then moved into that K curriculum. So we did purchase that curriculum last year. At the end of last year, it came in. And the teachers have been working over the summer to kind of acclimate to that new curriculum and put those activities in place for the coming year. And then the last thing is the tuition rate. So going back and looking at tuition, we haven't had a tuition increase in the last 15 years. So that's been some time. So I looked at programs around, I looked at the hourly rate. So it was easier for us to do it on the hourly rate versus the program, because what happens is our early learners are in for 4 half days, and then our older students are in for 5. So there was a little bit of a difference there. So currently we were at $303 a month for the 4-day program and $378 for the 5. And the proposed rates are $340 for the 4-day and $435 for the 5-day. And that's about a $3.70 an hour increase.
And is the cost increase just driven because labor cost increase?
That's part of it, that cost of living and that maintaining. Some of it also is looking at expansion. So at this point, this puts us in a good place to look at how we can best meet the needs of our students moving forward without having to continually look at increases. So my hope is that this will be a set rate for us for the coming years, and we won't have to adjust as we look to meet the needs of all of our students.
Sorry, can you repeat those?
I would love to.
What the new rates are?
Yeah,
I missed
absolutely.
it.
No, don't worry. It's probably me. I talk really fast and I try not to. So the 4-day program rate proposal is $340 a month. And the 5-day program rate is $435 per month. Thank you. You're welcome. And right now, so just so you understand, our special ed students are automatically enrolled in the program. Our non-disabled peers it's based on a lottery. So we do currently have a wait list. So what will happen is we did the lottery in the spring. We send out information to the families and let them know, and then any family that declines and doesn't want to participate for whatever reason, we do work our way down the wait list. I will say that we have a significant wait list this year for both our 3 and our 4-year-old programs.
So do you try to maintain a certain ratio?
We do, yeah, so we try to do a 60-40. In some cases, you know, like at one point at the end of last year, we were heavily at a 50-50. And that's because those students are coming in, like I said, as they turn 3. So most of the time it's just the 3-year-old programs. What we did to kind of help with staffing is we added another paraprofessional to the program to help support the students that were in there. Additional questions?
I'll just make a quick comment. I mean, you know, personally, from a parent standpoint, we used this program 9-10 years ago. Absolutely great experience. Candidly, I thought it was a bargain 9 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Didn't realize the rates haven't changed along the way.
Yeah.
So I understand the proposal, and I'm sure the cost of the program, et cetera, as well exceeded the increases.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve the raise tuition.
Make a motion to approve the new pre-K rates. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and motion passes.
Thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time.
Yeah.
Yep, you got it. So Jay's gonna come up, our Director of Finance and Operations, and first start off by giving a follow-up regarding the solar contract and giving you information that you requested at the last meeting.
Hi, everybody. How are we doing tonight?
Jay.
All right. As you can see, I know Maureen included in your packet an updated revision of the solar proposal to extend it for 12 years. What they're proposing to do is lock in for the last 12 years the rate as of year 10, as opposed to the rate as of year 20. It basically makes it so that there's going to be a slight profit on the carports as well over the last 12 years. It does take away the option of donating for potentially a dishwasher, because that's where it's going now, is towards this. But the resultant savings is about a $300,000 swing. You know, it looks like for the term of the contract now, there's about a $1.9 million savings in electricity costs, which is fairly substantial. There's no changes on the Dayton site. So that is their counter to come back with. Both Mike Delagala, who is the owner of the company, is on the Zoom call. If you have questions that he can answer, we can go that way. If you have questions of me, ask away.
Questions?
So what are the size panels we're using now?
So that would be a question maybe they can answer. Want to bring, his name's Mike Delagala, hopefully he's on under his name. Just raises. Yeah. So Mike is the owner of the Dayton site and the carport site. He and his partner Sean Robinson. I don't know if Sean's with him as well, but yes. Mike, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. So the question that was asked is what kind of panels we have on. You're talking about the carports, Phil?
Yep.
On the carports, do you know?
They are the output is 300 watt panels.
Okay.
So then you're saying that we'd be locked into a rate for the additional 12 years that we're putting on to this contract?
For what we pay them for the electricity, correct, at 16.1 cents, which is an all-in price.
What's the market rate right now?
You mean like if you're buying it from National Grid?
Yeah.
Right now, it's probably about 18 cents. I know that our net metering credits are running in the 17 cent, 18 cent range. Okay. And on the Dayton side, we're still paying around 10 cents. This is a little different because it's not a net metering situation. It basically feeds into the building. It produces electricity. They monitor the production, and then we pay them for the production. So obviously, if we underproduce and we need money, and we need electricity from National Grid, then we pay whatever, you know. We have a locked-in contract actually for supply. Oh, I think it's through, I can't think of the company's name now, but I think we're locked in at about 9.2 cents for supply plus whatever the distribution charges are. Yeah. So we do that as well because that also saves us considerably over the National Grid rate.
And they're getting a smart meter payment as well?
Smart meter payment?
Yeah. An incentive payment for the fact they're producing solar from the National Grid or from the state?
You mean like an SREC type thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, they get those benefits from us because they own.
So that doesn't take away, when we look at our costs, we're paying a flat cost to them for the electricity, but all the incentive components they get on the back end, plus they get us paying for the cost.
Yes. Yeah, because they own the system, we don't own it.
I understand that.
Similar, like if you have them on your house and you lease them as opposed to own them, whoever you're leasing it from, they get the SRECs.
So let me ask this question, which is, so if we didn't agree to this, what would happen?
If we didn't?
Yeah, if we didn't agree to it.
Mike, you want to take that one? Still here?
Sure. Yeah, I'm here. So if you didn't agree to it, the contract would end at year 20, and you would either have us remove the carports from the site, and or you would not receive electricity from the offsite net metering ground mount. So the contract would just end.
So it ends in 2036. The Dayton site, obviously, if it's still running, they could sell it to somebody, sell the electricity to someone else. The carports, we either have to have them removed, or they could, if we leave them on there, we could probably work out something that they could sell the electricity to somebody else. They're probably not going anywhere. I can tell you the concrete posts that the steel is supported in.
No, I get that.
They're not going anywhere.
But the ongoing rate that we're paying back in Dayton continues to go up on the contractual method.
Yes. So in year 2036, we'd be at about 17 cents, 17 and a half cents, it looks like.
So if we were to it just doesn't, it's hard to see it below, but so based on this, if we were to continue to run out through the end of the period we'd agreed to, the theoretical or the projected net benefit to the district would be what?
1.3 million, approximately, a little bit higher. So the extra 12 years adds another 600,000 to our potential savings.
That's, you're projecting the costs of energy from.
Yes. Yeah, and it's based on historical trends, so obviously it's really hard to predict what's going to be going on with electricity in 2038 or something like that, but it's based on the historical trends over a period of time.
And in the contract, we have continuing maintenance on the carport pieces, correct?
They own all maintenance. We don't do any of that.
But I'm just saying, if a panel goes down or something like that, like we're not getting reduced production, they're coming in and replacing it.
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, in the winter when there's snow on there, I get emails from Sean every day asking if the snow's melted yet.
Yeah, the snow I get.
But yeah, if anything goes wrong, they come in and do a routine maintenance thing once a year that I remember, and then if anything goes in, where they track, the production. So, because obviously if it's not producing, they're not going to make money either.
No, I understand that. I'm looking at the ongoing maintenance costs. So if we have panels that go down once you get 15, 20 years into the contract, and most of those warranties start to expire around that point in time.
Right.
So
yes. They're responsible.
Sure that they're responsible for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions?
Okay. So let's say at the end of the 20-year period, we want to continue business. I assume that we can't negotiate the rates at this point beyond that 20-year period.
Right, but we're locked in through 2036 regardless.
It's obvious,
Right.
But is there a anticipated renewal of technology such that we'd be able to continue beyond the 20 years?
It depends on who owns the system in 20 years. He's probably not going to own it in 20 years. The purpose of what he wants to do here is so that he can sell the system now. Right. Generally, that is the way it goes with most of these. Is they build them, keep them for a period of time, and then move on. I can't speak for the third site that we have that's in CFON because it's a different company. I mean, my 2 cents is I think it's advantageous for us to extend this. I think that we're saving plenty of money doing this. The fact that we're going to lock in, I think, helps. We'll have to figure something else out for the kitchen at Visco, but because I'd still like to address that as well.
So based on the way the system is running today, what is our annual savings?
Annual savings between both of them? It's
in our overall electricity costs.
So I would tell you, I mean, we have several months where we have no bill whatsoever because of the net metering credits, but we do pay them. So I'd say the savings there when you're paying, say, 10.5 or 11 cents a kilowatt as opposed to 17, you're probably talking about a 35–40% savings. As it goes on, depending on what happens with National Grid's rate, it would change. Dollar-wise, we're saving anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000 a year on electricity.
I guess I'm asking a slightly different question. So we know what, for example, last year's annual electricity consumption was.
Right.
If we were to buy that consumption out in the open market and compare it to what we're paying in this contract, what's the difference?
It's about a 35% swing.
So about a 35% savings in the open market, right?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I mean,
My question.
the thing is once you take the savings and invest it somewhere else in the operational budget, you don't really look at it and say, well, we're still saving this.
No, I totally get that. Right. I mean, that's not the way but I mean, it allows us to extend the budget and use it in other ways. I totally get that. My question is just more about, what's the difference in terms of, when you look at the open market versus, what we're currently paying today.
Right. And the other thing that's factored into this that has helped us was the LED conversion we did about 6 years ago, which is going to be paid off in almost all the schools, I think, this fiscal year. But that cut our consumption by 25% just by doing that alone. I think we've done good as far as electricity and energy savings and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the question is, when we look at this, the savings we're getting out of this approach, question is, what's the price difference for the amount that we're consuming here, in an annual year? What's the difference between having to buy that on the open market versus buying that?
Right.
That's a 35% swing. Yeah, that's a 20% swing, and I mean that's why we went up a couple of years ago with renewable.
So, but I mean, essentially what we're saying is we're counting on the price of electricity going up in the open market. Because that,
well, even if it maintains or stays the same, I mean, you see some different analyses that are out there. You read the McKinsey reports or the Bain reports of some of these sustainable energy structures that are there. It appears that electricity cost is more than likely going to go up, mainly because consumption is going up too. Yeah. So it's going to be.
But the dynamics there are how many people are going to install private solar panels or solar panels across the market, which is going to then offset the cost of electricity in the grid generation electricity. Put it that way.
What they're seeing is the amount of people that are installing private versus the increase in annual consumption. That's not offset. It's still a trend up there.
There's also infrastructure changes that they have to make across the grid, which will probably make the price go up in the public generation. So I think it's good that.
I agree. We seem to be performing pretty well. It makes sense in the answer to questions. I think part of it is you get 20 years into it, you want to make sure that the system's getting maintained.
Right.
And the production of the system doesn't just necessarily drop off. And I know they have a whole different incentive structure for Titan, but I mean, seems that's their carport citizens too.
Although the reality is if it stops producing, then we're just going to pay on the open market as if we didn't have them, right? We're not gonna be.
Yeah,
paying them if they don't
that's
produce.
kind of the whole point of not having, this agreement in this piece of place is, based on the kind of assumption and the understanding that those carports will be retained through the life of the agreement. So if we're gonna extend it 12 years and there's gonna be no maintenance of it, well, that's a waste of time.
Right.
But that's not what I'm hearing you say.
That's not, I don't think, I can't imagine somebody would buy these, or if Mike still owned them, that they would want to have them and have no production if they don't want to maintain them.
This is Sean Robinson. I can just attest, I am monitoring these daily, and I can guarantee you that the owner, whoever is working on this on a daily basis in 20 years will be keeping a hawkish eye on the daily production, and will be monitoring and dispatching if needed ASAP, because as Jay said, any broken panel or whatnot, inverter, that comes out of everybody's pocket basically. So, everybody's incentivized to keep this thing cranking as much as possible.
Great, Sean.
So we ready for a motion?
Yeah, I mean, I will work out the details with them. I just need that you guys either support this or don't, so that I can go forward, and then Mike and I can work out the rest of the details.
All right, I'll make a motion to support the new contract to extend the solar panels for another 12 years.
Yeah. 2048, we'll all still be sitting here.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes.
All right, thank you very much. The other piece that I don't have a lot of details, but I'm still working on closing out FY21. We're like 95% there. There's just a couple of details left. I've done most of the journal entries. Seems like we finished in fairly good shape for FY21, which is going to desperately, really help us for FY22 and 23 is my goal, is to make it so that we can get it through at least FY23 in decent shape as well. But I still have a few details to work out, so I guess at the next meeting is when I can give you all the gory details.
Great, thanks, Jay.
That's it. I'll put my back over there.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
Jay, appreciate it.
Yeah, not me. Back's actually doing good tonight, so far.
Okay, and moving on to the subcommittee updates. What's the policy subcommittee? It's like 2 updates.
So we met prior to this meeting, we looked at 2 policies. The first of which was policy EBCFA, which is our face covering policy. The local vaccination data that Trish reviewed earlier. And we looked at our existing policy, the updated policy from MASC, and we also discussed the press release from DESE that Commissioner Riley plans to ask the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education tomorrow to grant him the authority to mandate masks for all public schools until October. And at that point, middle and high schools that have at least 80% of students and staff vaccinated would be allowed to lift the mask mandate, vaccinated people, and other schools would have to keep it in place, and unvaccinated students and staff would be required to wear masks. So we looked at all of those things. We discussed, in addition to vaccination data provided by Trish, I shared a parent had shared with me, who's a pediatrician, that she's seen more positive tests and more kid-to-kid transmission that they weren't seeing with the original strain. So with that being said, our current policy has one line that exempts students in grade 1 and below. So
I can't hear you that well.
In anticipation of the state mandating this tomorrow, it was our recommendation as a policy subcommittee that we maintain the existing policy. However, it needs to be amended to update it to remove the line about exempting students in grade 1 and below. So that was our recommendation. We would need to take a vote on that to amend that policy.
Okay, so do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to amend our existing face covering policy passes.
And our second policy that needs updating is policy JF on school admissions. So this essentially, back in June, we had updated several policies, including JFABD, JFABE, JFABF, and those were related to homeless, foster care, and military. So this essentially is just updating one other policy to bring that in line with the others. So basically, we just need to update the language. So in our existing policy, there's a line that admission of children whose families are moving to Mendon-Upton will be made at the discretion of the superintendent. So we would need to remove that line and then also add under our cross references the policies that we updated back in June that I just mentioned. So those would be the changes that we would make to comply with regulations.
Okay, so a motion to approve the language changes?
Yep.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And motion passes. Moving on to new business. You're going to talk about athletic fees, it looks like?
Yeah, so I'd love to call up our athletic director, Kristen, who's going to talk a little bit about a need for an adjustment in our athletic fees. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you again. Unfortunately, it seems like more times than not that I come and speak with you. It is unfortunately about athletic fees. And not going the good way, I guess you could say. So once Mendon certified the budget, the athletic budget came in approximately $54,000 under basically what would be level service. Through the review of the budget that I originally submitted back in December, I was able to locate about $20,000 that we could remove from that budget really without any impact, assuming nothing catastrophic happens. And one of the big reasons is the majority of that $20,000 is looking at scoreboards for the gymnasium. Scoreboards in the gymnasium are original. They're pushing 25 years old. They use technology now that is significantly outdated, but they work. And I don't see why they won't work in this upcoming year. So the majority of that 20,000 was out of that, approximately 17 to 18,000. Additionally, there was a stipend in there for a requested stipend for an assistant indoor track coach, which was also taken out. So what originally was around 54,000 down to about a $30,000 shortfall. We need to make up for it in some way, shape, or form because the athletic budget, as it really is pretty bare bones. There's not much that you can remove. The overwhelming majority is salary, transportation, officials. There's a small amount in there for supplies, but for the most part, it's set. There's not really much wiggle room. So that being said, the only way to make up for that is an increase in fees. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. So we would be looking at a $75 increase across the board in the majority of our sports. The only sport that did not go up $75 was unified basketball, which is a little bit of a different sport in the sense that it doesn't play the amount of games that the other sports do. The season is much shorter. The stipends are much less. it didn't seem like quid pro quo when you look at other sports. So there was a smaller increase there, but there was an increase. So I believe you all have what the new fees would be. As far as it is a tiered system where football is the highest at $350. The majority of our sports are just below that at $325. Cheerleading, also a little bit different. The nature of the sport would be at $300, and then you've got unified basketball at $150. The one, or I should say this, are sports that are not impacted by this because we do not control the cost of those sports are our co-op sports. In other words, sports where we participate on another school's team. We see this in both of our ice hockey programs. Our boys participate for Northbridge. Our girls that participate in Hopkinton, and then swimming with Grafton. So those fees are controlled by the home school, and they're set. So we can't adjust those, unfortunately. So that's where we're at.
Chris, where does this put us? I don't know if you had a chance to look at it compared to like the other towns in the valley here.
On the higher side, I think one of the issues is we're always compared to that building across the street.
Yeah.
But it's apples and oranges. Right. The funding is much different. I would say this, in towns that are our size, you're seeing an increase in fees. Most budgets, there were budgetary issues. And when I say we're on the higher side, it's not by much. It might be by about $25, and it depends on, what are the towns that you're looking at. It is unfortunate, but if we want to maintain the funding of and really in some regards, it's most minimal, this is what we need to do.
So Chris, if I could, just to clarify, this was the amount, as I recall, that we requested within the budget to keep level services, but because of all of the budget, how the budget played out this year, we're essentially saying that we can't provide that $54,000 number to the sports budget this year.
That is correct.
Okay, so this is part of the compromise that we had with the town.
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that for everybody. Mm-hmm. And then the fact is that we have to significantly reduce the amount of money we can contribute from the budget to sports, and therefore we have to raise the fees to compensate them. Yep. To keep level service.
That is correct.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to approve the adjustment.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. And the motion is approved. Thanks, Chris. And moving on to the ratification of the MOAs, we have paraprofessionals and the ABA techs, as well as the administrative assistant MOAs have been ratified by the membership. And they're coming to us for ratification. We're going to need a motion to approve or to ratify the MOAs. Any discussion on the MOA? Okay.
I'll make a motion to ratify MOAs for the and the administrative.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
And the MOAs have been ratified. Moving on to other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of the first meeting. Hearing none, we'll move on to correspondence. And we have received a request to bargain COVID-related health and safety issues from Shelley Cook, president of Mendon-Upton's Teacher Association. And
I can just speak to that, just
Yeah.
that, we've already started to meet. We've met, talked, and then met last week and are scheduling a meeting coming up. We've shared some of the draft protocols, and we'll be going over that and then working on the draft MOI. So when that's resolved and we work through that, we can bring that forward.
Okay. Thank you. And then moving on to future agenda items, we have a presentation and approval of the 2021-2022 district action plans, ratification of the MOA for remaining bargaining units, as well as approaches to increase the transparency and communication and decisions made in the district. And that concludes our agenda for the evening. And can we get a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn the meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to adjourn passes at 8:48 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
I just got one question before.